Hello, good evening, and welcome to Upfront. Today, I bring you a guest who has experience as a banker. He's also an economist because that's how he trained. He's actually been Ghana's representative to China in times back under the John Kufuor administration. My guest today is Ambassador Afaridonko. After this break, we will delve into Ghana-China relations, and later on, is there a savior for Ghana's banking industry? You welcome back. This is Upfront. My name is Raymond Alqua. I did tell you that my guest today is Ambassador Afaridonko. Ambassador, you're welcome.
Thank you.
I hope you are doing well.
Sure, I am.
Have you finally abandoned the tuxedo, necktie, bow tie sometimes business?
No. I don't think I can ever abandon that.
Well, that's interesting.
But as you can see, I'm going traditional.
That's interesting.
This is a new vogue, as per the president's style. And I think we've all got to follow the leader, sort of.
Interesting. I want us to start from a position that you occupied some time ago. That's Ghana's representative to China. Ghana recently is in a very cozy relationship with China. We are seeking, among other things, to get in the bigger scale a 50 billion century bond from that country. In the interim, though, this year, we would expect China to give us 500 million for infrastructure agreement of a sort, which is a barter, now agreed barter. So they're going to build the projects. Then we pay them with bauxite. We set up a refinery that's going to do that along the line. There's been a lot of worry on the continent, more importantly, of some form of Chinese invasion, comparable to what happened during the colonial times. So Zambia is a current example of how China can destroy a country. People have actually given examples of how, for example, when you look at what's been happening when it comes to galamsey in Ghana and the role of the Chinese in this particular field, there's a lot of worry about whether we can engage China and be the beneficiaries at the end of the day. Do you feel there's generally a Chinese invasion on the continent?
The simple answer is no.
Really?
It's not an invasion. It's not an invasion. You see, you shouldn't look at the world as if it's only Ghana and China or Africa and China in that particular sphere. No. To go back, you use the word Ghana and China are in a very cozy relationship now. We've always been in cozy relationship from the beginning. And if you know a little bit of the antecedents of our history as to when we started the relationship.
The Nkrumah support.
Yes. Not Nkrumah support as such. Nkrumah support in terms of putting the two countries together.
Yeah.
But the support of the government that was in place when President Kufuor then was the Minister of Foreign Affairs, where he voted for China to be on the Security Council of the UN. That's as far back as then. That's in the 60s. It's a long time ago. So going back, that's just by the by. We do have a relationship.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't call it cozy. We have a very good relationship. And so should it be. You see, we live in a small village as a world, and we all interact with each other. And therefore, the last thing you want to do is to put yourself in a position where somebody could accuse you of being either uncooperative or rather unnecessarily cozy, to use your words. You want to cooperate. And there's always the idea that various countries can cooperate with each other and move on. There's nothing like I'm a country, but my views or my interests is different from country B, simply because I'm not in that country. Every country has its own interest first. And therefore, when we hear other presidents outside talking about their country first, so do we. Here, it's also Ghana first all the time. And so is China first to Chinese, and so first to so-and-so.
Those who allege some form of China's massive presence on the continent, they made a claim based on what the recent investments has been. I mean, barely 2 decades ago, China was number 4 or 5 on the continent when it comes to investment. Now it is leading. Here in Ghana, it is fast becoming our biggest trade partner. If you drill it down, the women in Makola who used to rely on GTP or any of the local manufacturing groupings for their textile are increasingly looking to China. On the other side, the traders unions are complaining about their retail space being taken over by the Chinese traders in this particular case. That ripples down to what the Galamsey effect has been and all of that. It's not business as usual. This looks like an extraordinary presence, many will complain.
The thing is, when you say business as usual, what do you mean? It's relative to time. What time are we talking about business as usual?
As in, barely 2 decades ago, we knew Chinese. Business were here.
Fine.
But now there's heavy presence. To some extent, an intimidating presence that the small market woman is complaining about.
I wouldn't put it as an intimidating process. That is not correct. It cannot be correct in the sense that we are not in a static position.
Okay.
Each country develops and we improve. Everybody, every human being, you develop. Whatever situation you find yourself, you have to deal with it and move on. Now, if you have to make certain changes to move on, move on. You just talked about China being number 5, now being number 1, and the Ghanaians being used to maybe non-Chinese relationship, now having a Chinese relationship. The thing is, what do you do with what you have?
I see.
What effort are you making to change the situation to your benefit, considering that the other party that you are dealing with also has its own interest? As we have in all foreign diplomatic relations all over the world, is that country's interest first, friends second. Because the statement is always true that, there's permanent interest, but not permanent friends. And therefore, going per the examples you gave, if in the past it's been said that we are not depending on Chinese goods and services, Chinese textiles, as you mentioned, and others, and we're depending on other textiles from other countries, now that maybe we've deemed it better to move into the Chinese sphere because maybe they are cheaper, maybe quality-wise, maybe circumstances-wise. Why not? It's a question of cooperation. What do we get out of the relationship with the Chinese as against our relationship with some other countries? Now, if we've moved on since 1957 and we've realized that some other countries have moved forward by having a relationship with either Chinese or Japanese or some other country, why do we have to sit down and say that just because we are used to the UK, we're going to sit there and just continue doing that, irrespective of whatever efforts are being made by the other side, and therefore how we could improve our lot? That is the situation.
You've been to China, you've lived in China, you've engaged Chinese for a very long time. Are they exploitative in nature?
No.
They're not?
They're not exploitative. They take advantage of a situation that we inure to their benefit, and so should we.
But that sounds to me like exploitation.
Pardon?
Taking advantage of a situation that's your benefit. And this will sound also to me that regardless of what the other person is getting in this case.
So does it mean that if we Ghanaians, we take advantage of the situation that we know to our benefit, being we are being exploitative?
When we consider the interests of others too, shouldn't
exactly.
we?
You should consider the interests of your neighbor. You love yourself as much as possible, but not more than your neighbor, as the saying goes. So the situation is this. If you are in a, call it a difficult position, I don't want to call it difficult, but if you're in a situation where you have to consider various options, you look at which option is best suited to you, considering that you live in a world community, and therefore you just cannot do whatever you like. That being so, that's where you have to consider the national interest first and see how it fits, because every tailor has various measurements.
I get your point.
The person that you have to sew for.
The West complains that China is not moral. They will give you money even if you have a despotic leader. They will give you money even if your systems cannot help you develop or get the money back to them, or you can't repay, and so they can take over sections of your country. They say that China doesn't care whether the money will be used to oppress the people in the country or it will be used to the good of the people in the country. They believe that this kind of relationship it looks like a global South-to-South relationship, the West Africans, the Africans, and that of China is inimical to the development of Africans. Do you think so?
I don't think so. You keep using the words Africans, then you jump from Ghanaians to this and that. Have we ever bothered to find out from those particular African countries what their interest is and why they are into that relationship? That is the issue. So nobody can come here and tell us, well, Ghanaians or Ghana government, or Ghana for that matter, Why are you in this relationship? They haven't tried to find that out.
No.
If they were to find out, they'll be told.
Okay.
On the other hand, why do you just assume that precisely because the Chinese are seen to be helping so many other African countries move forward in terms of infrastructure, and that's where the real issue is. And therefore, it's too fast. We haven't had that since colonial times. It's taken us so many years to get here. How come the Chinese are helping us doing this? How come the British or the Germans or the Americans are not doing this? Forgetting that the same tactics that are being applied now is what applied during the after the World War when America helped Europe. And the same thing is being done all over. Lee Kuan Yew did the same thing.
Yeah.
You, the Chinese power, Malaysians, everybody. So you do what is best suited for your country's development. And choices are there to be made. If you want to go slow and go per a particular route, fine. If you want to move forward and then make progress as quickly as possible, fine. Because in the long run, the next 50 years, you and I might not be around.
I agree. Now, the complaint moves to the point that here in Ghana, we first sought to have some form of a bond from China. We did, we're successful. Our relationship is moving very fast. So we are considering a 50 billion century bond. It sounds like an exciting one. Government says it's predominantly for infrastructure, looking into the future, making sure that we build the state that the young people the next 50 or 100 years will be very proud of. But people are concerned about the debt implications of these arrangements. Now, when you dealt with China, what was the general principle? Was it economic cooperation, or there were other underpinning political pressures that China will bring to you when it gives you money?
The answer to that is there are pressures all over the world. When you want a relationship with anybody, you must define in your head what kind of relationship you want and try and see if you can bring out what sort of relationship that other partner may want. That's why you dialogue.
Okay.
Once you agree as to what you want to do, then the two of you have to enter into some dialogue and get to a point where you agree to do it this way or we agree not to do it that way. Either you agree not to agree or you agree to agree on something else. Then you move on. It's not as if somebody gets up or one side country gets up, say, I want to do this and that's what I want. Without a normally it's a pre-co kind of relationship. And if you don't have it, you cannot have a relationship.
Okay.
So going back to your word, sorry I have to do this to you all the time, by going back to your own words to answer the question. But the thing is, neither the Chinese nor ourselves could force each other to do something against the other party's will.
Is that so? Recently, there was a conversation over whether or not StarTimes should be given a contract by the state. Ghana canceled the contract with StarTimes because it couldn't deliver. Now we won cases at arbitration and we've been doing very well with the case. But government told us that we need to re-engage them because some other loan we are asking from the same Chinese sources are not coming in, and the Chinese are insisting unless we engage StarTimes. This is not a negotiation of equals, is it?
Are you sure the answer was the Chinese are insisting?
Yes, that's what government tells us.
Is that what?
Actually, the communication ministry is very forthright on that.
That the Chinese are insisting
that without the particular engagement with StarTimes, which is one of their companies from their state, they're not going to give us the money.
Well, I cannot sit here and know the details of what you're saying. But even on the presumption that that's correct, there's dialogue going on. A contract has been awarded, somebody is doing something. I don't know this particular case. And then you come in and you say that I want to continue or give it to some other person or some other entity. And they tell you, no, if you don't sort this one out, we can't go forward. Isn't that a fair comment? As I said, I don't know the details. But the point I'm trying to bring out to you is the fact that governments nor countries don't live in isolation on a little island. We all belong to a world community. There must be dialogue, there must be discussions, there must be agreement on issues, even though, as we know, certain countries get out of agreements.
Yeah, I agree.
Yes, so that happens. Now, let me finish the point. The point here is this, that going back to your first, or the earlier point that you made, the real deficit that we're trying to fight is not just 50 billion that you're talking about. The deficit that is known to exist, infrastructure-wise, is about 100 billion. So we are nowhere near it anyway. And the plan in place now is we've got to take time to try and evaluate it. And you realize that, yes, as you mentioned, we want infrastructure development to go on. How do we pay for them? And there are various means of doing that. Either you go and raise a bond issue to do it, blah, 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 or per what we're trying to have done now, per the Chinese. You go per route where you get another Chinese company to develop the bauxite thing, process it into alumina, and then use the proceeds thereof, which is about 5 times whatever the initial amount is, to help offset or pay for the debt that we accrued with the development projects that we're going on, the infrastructure development.
That's a good plan.
Sino-Hydro. Of course, that's a good plan. Because if you don't have Yanum, as we say in Akan, you don't call Yanum to come and help you fight. So here you are, we don't have the wherewithal. And yet we've got to go ahead and do these projects. What you have to do is to, what others call engineering. You know, use your initiative, think ahead, do your analytical things, and then move on. There's no perfect plan in this world. But as and when you carry on with the plan, you fine-tune them, and then you get on with it. I personally don't see much wrong with this tag of exploitation, this tag of too much is being done by the Chinese. Is it to our benefit? Have we done our homework properly? What are the alternatives? Have we made sure that the other alternative that maybe we are used to is not too good or has not worked well, so let's try this other one. As and when you get along and there are issues that need to be done and the fine edges polished up, we do that. But we don't sit back and say, this is how we used to do it, and therefore we're not going to change. Change must come.
Is this good change?
It is.
You see it as such?
It is.
Some say it's because of our current engagements and increased engagements with China. That's why we can't, for example, drive out the people who are engaging in illegal, destroying huge water bodies, making it impossible for us to get the basics that our environment used to have in times past.
I agree that we have problems with the environment.
Yes.
But also,
predominantly a Chinese problem.
Fine, I agree, I will accept that. But you will also go and find out and realize that something is being done about it.
I agree.
Yes.
But many believe that the pace at which we could have done this. For example, when there were complaints about how Chinese were destroying water bodies and all of that, the Chinese ambassador's response was pretty simple. To tell the government of the Republic of Ghana to rein in the media because they don't believe that the media understands or knows how the relationship should go.
Yes, that's the opinion of the Chinese ambassador.
Yes.
With all due
but that's
respect,
a country's representative to Ghana.
Fair enough. And she has spoken. And that's why when you're in that position, you must be circumspect in what you say. You just described me as having been an ambassador before. And you expect me to pontificate on this? You don't do that.
No, I want to find out from you.
No, I got you.
Because it doesn't look like a country that's engaging the other country in a nice way. In fact, it was a demand for, surprisingly, the government of this republic to control the media, tell them what to say or not say about whether or not their people are destroying our water bodies.
Yes, she's entitled to her opinions. What are we doing as a country? What are you, the media, doing here? The fact that somebody has said something doesn't mean you shouldn't do your work.
Oh, we're still reporting the issue.
Of course you are. And it's having the desired effect because of the reports that you've been making, the Chinese engagement is being reduced constantly. And to the fact that recently, when certain official visits were made to China, we heard what the Chinese authorities were saying, that if we find any Chinese persons or entities going wrong with the law, we should go ahead and prosecute them. Yeah. And go ahead and deal with them. So yes, there's a problem. I don't deny that. Yes, the environment is being affected. I don't deny that. But the issue is, what are we doing about it? We shouldn't sit down and just listen to comments that will be made by persons who are not necessarily within the Ghanaian system as such, and say that because they are from country A or country B, and therefore when their ambassador is saying this or that, we should let it go. That ambassador is saying whatever he or she thinks is best suited for their country. And we should also try and do the right thing, because this is our country and we have our laws. So apply the laws and get on with it. Keep on reporting.
There's a fear that because we are always cup in hand begging Chinese for money, we may not be able to crack the whip on the other country.
That's incorrect. we'll be able to do what we have to do. As human beings, naturally, we're all in a hurry to see things, you know, in a flash. But when you're dealing with issues involving various countries, you have to accept and give them a bit of credit that they can also decide on issues for themselves. And we should go ahead and decide our issues, of course, by cooperating, dialoguing, and getting on with it. And do what we have to do. I don't think the situation is so dire that the relationship should be cancelled. No, no.
So, Ambassador, I was asking this question to do whether or not you would prefer being prudent, making sure that you raise your own money, you are productive, you don't waste the resources. As the Auditor General's report suggests, we waste a lot of resources in this country, to borrowing, be it in a barter form or whichever form that it may be.
As I said, borrowing can take many forms. It depends on what you mean by borrowing. Whether somebody tells you do a barter is borrowing, when you go and actually go to a bank and ask for money is borrowing, and when somebody gives you a gift, it's also borrowing, because there's no gift without strings, all kinds of borrowings. I know that. But the issue here is, I personally will put in a little adage. You see, there's a Latin phrase in law. I'm not a lawyer, but in English, not Latin, you can't give what you don't have. Now, you don't have the money, let alone much of the technology needed. And you want to get certain things done. Let's take basic infrastructure, building roads. Now, you have a choice of going straight ahead to a bank or something to raise money, whether you do it per borrowing bonds or whatever, you go through a banking system to raise the money. Or you have certain assets, like let's use the example, bauxite, which is still in the ground and it's being dug and sold. So instead of doing that, okay, country B, this is what I have. I'll prefer using some of the assets I have to collateralize and move on and get you to also provide this service of infrastructural development. That, to my mind, is a much better deal, because it's not a question of borrowing. Borrowing won't come cheap. It won't come without cost. There's a cost to it. There are certain elements to it that in the long run, whenever you are ready, you even have to go out and do what you call tender, to invite and get on with it and all that. That involves a lot of stress, for want of a better word. As against the direct one, which you call it barter or you call it whatever, you do it, and then you use your own assets to sort of, if in banking terms, collateralize the loan you're taking. But you have a leeway, you have time, because by the time the bauxite gets developed, within about 3 years or so, and you have the finished product with that better value, you can use it to help amortize the value of the infrastructure development.
We are not mortgaging our resources.
Not all our resources.
We are not depriving.
Some.
We are not depriving the future of this country.
No.
The right to decide what to do with their resource.
Correct.
We are not exploiting currently every single thing we have in the name of infrastructure development to make sure that we are denying that generation which will pay debt, that generation which will come with very little resource available to them.
No.
Is that what you're doing?
We're not. That's not what we're doing. The answer to that is very simple. That's not what we're doing. Going back 10, 20 years back, we still had debts.
Yeah.
And maybe now, in real terms, you may see them as insignificant. But the debt we have now, infrastructure development, is about 100 billion.
But the difficulty is that already we have almost 73% debt to GDP ratio.
Yes.
That's very worrying.
Yes.
As of 2016, that was the current state.
Yes.
In fact, we've used expanding the GDP base to try and bring it down.
Yes.
But the reality is that we still have a huge debt on our neck.
And therefore,
it doesn't sound to the young person who is struggling to make it through school, who would have to pay along the line, that borrowing more is the way forward.
To the young person who is trying to move through life, you think the country is borrowing to enhance infrastructure development, which will also enhance further employment in the system, which will also further enhance all the multiplier effect in it, is less important than the gentleman who is thinking about his future and the fact that the country might have to pay off something. What rather you want to find out is, whatever percentages that you allude to GDP and all that, Can it be lowered? And if it can be lowered, per what means? Because the development
Not
might go.
borrowing, that's the final result.
If you are not going to borrow, then that ratio is likely to come down. Because the other thing that you mentioned, that barter thing that system that you refer to as barter, would not necessarily push up that ratio, would it?
Well, many believe that it's an indirect form of doing so. Because not only are you borrowing, you're also depriving the people of their resources. So exactly what we left.
Which people?
The people who are unborn today, the people 50 years will be the ones running the state, the ones who have to pay off this debt. They are the ones who really have to be the ones benefiting from this. But they are the ones being deprived of any resource left.
Yes, assuming your argument is right. So we should remain static and wait.
There's an alternative you're not considering.
Which one?
The alternative of being prudent, being frugal, making sure that you don't abuse the resources.
Which resource now are you talking about?
I'm talking about when you raise taxes in this country, when we have to lose $4 billion to corruption and the related factors.
You are moving into a different tangent. And I agree
Is it different? It's not at the core of our engagements as a people.
You are moving into a different tangent. You see, you started by talking about a form of borrowing to go up with the development. You talked about raising bonds. You talked about us against barter. And then you move on, the children or the present children growing up and paying off the indebtedness. And therefore, I asked about how do we resolve that. And then you mentioned, because of taxes and all that. See, you move into a different time. If you go ahead and raise bonds, the bonds will be at a certain price. That price has to be paid. And you have the only way, or one of the major ways to do that, is to raise taxes. Yes, you have to raise taxes to help amortize that bond until the money that you got from that bond, because you're going to use it for, assuming for infrastructure development, that's not going to yield results immediately. So how do you pay for them? That is also the negative side. So you see, we have to have a balancing act. There's no sacrosanct way of moving ahead in terms of development. Circumstances presently will determine how to move it forward.
Okay.
And we should be mindful of what we have, which we can give, and mindful of what we may not have, which we need. And thirdly, be mindful of where to go for those things. We have alternatives. There are so many agencies and countries who may profess to help you. And you look at it and look at yourself, and then find out which way forward you should do this.
Do you think we've been able to deal prudently with China? Have we had the best of deals?
Oh, yes. I think so far, so good. I think we're doing fairly well. There have been, subsequent to my departure from that particular position, there have been other ambassadors. They're all doing their work. Every ambassador deserves the little attention that we need to have when it comes to these things. And I cannot sit here and pontificate about what somebody else is doing. But I can assure you that they all do their work with the interests of the country first.
And we have the best negotiating teams.
We're doing fairly well.
Fairly well doesn't sound good enough to me. This is 21st century. We'd expect you to say that we have the best. We get the best out of these people.
No, that would be rather verbose. You don't say that. You are dealing in the world community.
Okay.
In as much as you think you are the best, somebody else may also think he's the best. So I think you get to the point where you use words like fairly well, and that will compromise the whole issue.
Ambassador, we need to take a break. When we come back from the break, we continue our conversation.
Sure.
Well, folks, Ambassador Faridonko is my guest today. We'll move beyond China and talk about our issues after this break. You welcome back to Upfront. My name is Raymond Aqua. I did tell you my guest is a wonderful person. He has so much experience with Ghana's dealings with China, and that's the crux of our conversation today. Ambassador, you're welcome.
Thank you.
We're talking about whether or not we have the best people to represent us. You choose somewhat a diplomatic word, fairly, well, there's a term that denotes that we are doing average well when it comes to our engagement with other countries and people who negotiate on our behalf. This is not the position, for example, Ambassador Dike takes. He believes that for some time, we've not been able to prop up and come up to the people that we ought to put there. there are generations. That previous generation was wonderful, but currently there seems to be a vacuum in many of our dealings with the outside world. From what you are saying, are we guaranteed that virtually every negotiation, the Ghanaian interest will be well represented?
I would want to believe that we are, that the answer is yes. Every question posed, and whatever reaction you have, will depend upon the circumstances.
Okay.
I cannot sit here and pontificate on whatever Ambassador DK or say might have said. He must know the reason why he's saying that, and from which angle. I wouldn't know.
Okay.
All I can confirm to me, to you, is that things are being handled fairly well. I use those words fairly for a reason, and I think I've explained that already.
Certainly.
So, yes, whether you think it's doing very well or less of that, I wouldn't know. The people sent over any time this country needs to send people out to talk or discuss or negotiate are normally the best under the circumstances. It may not mean necessarily that they went ahead and delivered an excellent result. We're all human beings. Mistakes could be made here and there. And when mistakes are made, you iron them out or you sharpen them up properly and move on. I cannot, of course, say that they were all wrong or they were all right. No, that's why I use the word fairly. So yes, we have competent people to do that. And as and when your services are required, you go ahead and do it. Yes.
You are known to tough. I need you to evaluate this situation also for me. There are many, especially in Ghana's minority, that have stated that the current speed of our borrowing is problematic for one simple reason, because we are in a hurry to meet up promises, especially by the current government. One district, one factory, free SHS, promises that goes to delivering dams to villages, promises to the extent that there's $1 million US going to every single constituency. All of these have to be delivered within a matter of 4 years, at least according to the promises that were made. It is the driving factor behind the massive quest to borrow more. Do you think this is appropriate?
I don't think it's entirely appropriate. Yes, certain promises have been made. That's correct. 2, certain efforts are being made to achieve those promises. And as you and I know, most or some of these promises cannot all be done within 4 years. You know that.
That's not a promise.
And the fact that they will do this, I will do this, I will do that, doesn't mean the thing is not in place. It's different from saying, I will finish it by so and so period. That's the nuances there.
Really?
Yes. Because if
I doubt if any Ghanaian has the understanding.
Well, I don't know.
If the people who did the voting were of the opinion that this could be done in the future and not within the time limits that you have as a president.
The thing is, the president or whoever made those promises, if you vote for me, I'll do A, B, C, D.
Yes.
Now, he has a first term of 4 years. Does it always
The only guaranteed term of 4 years.
It's 4 years. The only guaranteed term is 4 years.
Yes.
Now, he starts whatever he's doing, and he keeps telling all of us he's in a hurry. Yes, he's in a hurry. Because you don't sit down and take a whole year to plan what you want to do. So you have a fair idea about how you want to go about it. And he's made his choices. Now the accusation is that he seems to be running. Now, if the fellow doesn't run, how will he get to the tip?
I said that the running is not in tandem with the results.
Wait, I hear you. I hear you. Let me finish my point. I hear you. The point is, he has started something. He may not. Some of them will be finished. Assuming you talk about just the one district, one factory. Assuming we just take that. And we have how many districts? I don't know.
254 now.
254, okay. Assuming at the end of the term, he has say 192 finished, and the balance not finished, but in progress.
Would that be okay for you?
Of course, that should
Would
be
that
okay
be in fulfillment of the promise of one district, one factory?
Yes, because some are finished, others are in progress. To me, speaking for myself, that would be satisfactory. On the other hand, if you talk about some other projects within the 4-year period, say SHS or whatever, some of them are finished.
Yes,
others are still in progress.
is currently in progress. It's not in doubt.
Fine. And it may not be finished even by the 4 years. It may not be finished.
Okay.
Well, there will still be students around and all that. So my point is, have you started the work? Yes. Where about are you? What percentage have you achieved? It will come out. When that comes out, then we will determine whether or not you are a failure or we'll let you go on again.
Okay,
That
but
means,
there's a proverb that says that Agrobeso Ifranopa.
correct.
The first year promise was 51 factories. In the first year, none of these factories were commissioned. None at all. As in 2017. There was not a single factory built in this country. Does not tell you the rate at which this will go.
Yeah, it tells me that it wasn't done in first year, 50 wouldn't go, or 50 weren't done.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean at the end of the fourth year, 200 and whatever it is wouldn't be done.
So you are amenable to the idea that you can do some of this and not all?
Of course I am.
Okay.
Yes.
And you do not think that the coordinator of the program says we will do all by the end of the 4 years.
Fantastic.
Indeed, the Minister for Information is still insisting we will do all by the end of the 4 years.
Agreed.
The senior minister, however, is quite less optimistic, saying we will start it. We will not be able to do all. Which of them do you think is a better plan?
I've told you, it's not a plan. Which of them is a better view?
Oh,
use the right word. It's not a
I
plan.
get you. But in this case, they are presenting different ways of implementing this policy.
Yes. The plan is to provide so and so and so figures by so and so period, and the fourth year, as you said. And you said first year, they said you thought 50 will be done. 50 has not been done.
Yes.
I agreed. And somebody else saying, or a couple of them are saying that we'll deliver by the end of the year. Fine. The question is, as we speak now, how many have been delivered? I don't even know. But all I'm saying, if at the end of the fourth year, a vast number or a bigger percentage or whatever has been delivered, you name the figure, and the amount still not yet to be delivered, still in progress, I would call that satisfactory. I give you the figures of 192.
I guess you. I understand that.
So that's satisfactory.
Well, it's interesting to know that. I want to move to an area that you are very competent into, and that's the banking space. You set up Car Bank.
I don't like the word you are very competent. I'm not very competent. I may be fairly competent.
Oh, I see. I may have to adopt the fairly word because I'm just wondering how many people would disagree with the very competent that I stated in this case.
Please.
You set up Car Bank.
Yes.
You've been in the banking space. Recently, that space has been in a very terrible state. To be fair, the banking supervision, along the line, the Bank of Ghana, we have 7 banks that are gone under currently. 1/3 of all microfinance institutions, according to the Bank of Ghana itself, are either distressed or folded up. The same happens to rural and community banks too. The banking supervision keeps telling the people of this republic we are on top of the issues. It's just like the way Woodrow Wilson said after the First World War that this will be the last war to end all wars. After the first 2 banks collapsed, that's what we were told, and yet 5 followed. Are you optimistic the people in charge of this sector really have been able to manage it properly?
Yes, they are in charge. As remember the advert about when the fire came out, and a certain radio station talked about a certain policeman saying, I'm in charge. Yes, in charge. Meanwhile, he was running away.
Yeah, that was interesting.
Yes, I remember that. Yes, we should always assume, and I would want to believe, that the authorities in charge of the banking side are competent enough to handle the situation. I also believe that the situation as we find ourselves now is not something that you just rush in and take decisions. You have to look at it critically and then take whatever decision you need to take.
Oh, they're taking a lot of decisions, actually.
Yes. They will take very bitter decisions, very bitter pills will have to be swallowed. And the repercussions are not always pleasant. I know that. But certain pills, if you need to get well, you have to swallow them and keep on with it.
It's just that there's contention currently.
The contention, the point that you're making, which I'm prepared to dialogue with you on, is the fact that whether or not they've been competent in handling whatever they've done in the past. And my answer to that is, so far, so good, in the sense that we may not be very happy with what has been done because of what we have as a result of their actions now. But there's always the central bank in place. So you refer to whatever work I did in the past.
Yeah.
Now, the fact that that bank is still there, whether I'm there or not, the bank is still there.
Yeah.
And I did certain things in the name of the bank. Others will do certain things in the name of the bank. The bank is always there. Now, it doesn't mean whatever I did in the past is all correct. maybe the way I did it, I could have done it the other way, and then roughen up certain edges and move on. Maybe somebody else would have attacked it from a different point of view in terms of priorities. But that's the human factor in all of us.
But this case is way too different.
I know.
What we are having is clear-cut abuse of rules-specific laws. We are having, and the evidence is pretty clear, the PwC report, the KPMG report, the Borders report. They do not point to mere mistakes, decisions that went bad. They were, in the words of the Borders report, deliberate attempts to misuse, let's say, liquidity support. This is one of those situations where people's discretionary, what do you call it, rights or people's discretionary work might have gone wrong.
I agree with that. And therefore, your issue is you want the axe to fall and fall fast and let those who took those decisions be sanctioned.
Well, many surveys have suggested that. The Ghanaian people are not excited by the we will fix it, and yet nobody goes on kind of business that's happening currently.
So what do you want then? You want them sanctioned or not?
That's what is being demanded.
Good. If that is what is being demanded, it's a question of timing. It will come.
Really?
I believe that.
We were told the same thing after the first two banks collapsed. Nothing really happened. We were told that people were being reviewed, they were going through investigation, yet 5 more followed, and we are still told the same thing that, oh, we are looking at reports. Parliament said was doing a probe, another precision of a report was supposed to be produced. It doesn't sound to the ordinary person that when the nation sinks in over 12 billion, there is that urgency to fight back and get the money. Not only that, but to hold people responsible.
There is still the urgency to get the money back. I would want to believe that the little that I know about banking, you don't rush in to do things in the normal way, haphazardly, or rather in a rush. A few minutes ago, we were talking about the government hitting the ground running. They're in a hurry and want to get certain things done. Yes. Now, in this case, are you going to say that the central bank should be in a hurry to fire people left, right, and center and do this and do that without using the law? It
was in a hurry to collapse banks. It will be foreseeable.
No, it's not a fair statement. It was in a hurry to save depositors' money and save the customers, those banks, so that they won't lose their money. And that's why they came in to salvage whatever it was, so that the money won't be lost. That one, they were in a hurry, and they were right.
And some of the bank owners contest this. Some of them are even in court contesting this matter.
But then the customer has been saved.
But what the
money.
Bank of Ghana even admits is that even at the central bank, the people clearing the mess today, there were people in there who failed to do what they were supposed to do.
Assuming that is correct,
that's what they say.
They will have to be sanctioned.
And of course, I mean, that would have been something we would expect to see, but up to now, there's no real action on that level.
Yes, you are right, but don't you see that you're again in a hurry when it comes to the law? You are not the law, I'm not the law. Procedures are there. You can't jump the gun in this instance.
We've not seen any interdiction even yet.
Well, they might not have started because you and I are not in there and wouldn't know the details of what they will be doing there.
In fact,
so we have to be a bit patient.
The call for patience suggests to many again that, well, oh, let's do it the usual ways. Yet they say there's an extraordinary situation at hand. Don't we need extraordinary measures?
You may need extraordinary measures, but you're dealing with the human factor here. You are dealing with people's money there. You have to be mindful. You have to be more mindful of whatever you do. Because if you are not, it could backfire. And that angle should be looked at carefully. I'm not here to cover up for any personalities.
I get your point. Do you think we should overhaul the central bank?
Oh, I don't know, but I don't think so.
Really?
No.
Mindful of what's happened over the period of time?
No, it's a question of letting them handle it. And you see, in central banking business, there's what you call moral suasion. And a nudge here and there, you know, and a nod there to get things done. There's a saying in Akan, you know, Sikan Peroff. You know, you don't hurry when it comes to money matters. These are very volatile, at the same time very delicate matters when it comes to anybody's money. And you have to be mindful of how you place your fellow human being when it comes to messing up with his money. Maybe that's life savings. And therefore, yes, they ask for fall, yes, disciplinary action will be taken, but you have to do things. Even the money that's out there that we have to retrieve, we have to go through due processes. These things take time. We are aware of the famous case which is still pending in court, and we are still to get the money, full money back. So I think we should be a bit patient. If you grant me the accolade that you gave, that I have a fair knowledge about these things, then please bear with me a little bit and let's give them a chance.
I want to explore your expertise on this matter too. There's something that came out in all of these expose on how these banks collapsed. It's to do with the competence of people who sit on boards of the banks. Has this always been a problem?
I don't know, but I don't think so. When I say I don't know because I don't know the rules now. But what I do know is that in the past, before somebody could serve on a board anywhere, the names are sent to the central bank. And they know. And they will tell you, we don't want this fellow there, or we don't want that, a wink here or not there. No, this one, we may not. Or at best, they may even point out to you that for so and so reasons, we don't think so and so should sit on the board.
So the qualifications of the person matter?
Yes, qualifications and experience, not just qualifications, qualifications and experience. To be a businessman, you don't need to have a doctorate degree in business. So qualifications, yes, they are relevant, but it's not the ultimate. Experience, I think, depending upon the field, is more relevant than just the qualification per se.
Again, exposés brought out very murky dealings by people that ordinarily you expect to be prim and proper. Has corporate governance in the banking space always been this kind, the one that people engage in? I mean, very scary transactions that ordinarily nobody would supervise, sometimes taking money from banks unapproved and all of that, taking money on behalf of the bank with all of this. Has it always been the standard?
What do you mean? You mean the rate at which they are doing it being the standard?
I'm saying that, has it always been the case that people flagrantly abuse procedures and corporate governance rules in the banking space?
No, I don't think it has always been the case. It's become more relevant now because of the spate or the number of banks in issue and the number of issues that we've had to deal with. It's more prevalent, and therefore we see more of those. But it's always been there. Corporate governance has always been an issue in the past, and that's how we've had to deal with it. So yes, we will see things not in the same way that we expect, but these things happen and we have to deal with them. We have to deal with the situation as and when they arise, but not when we have to just carry on and do it as if this is the way we used to do it, so we'll do it the same way. No.
There's a complaint about the number of local banks. I remember NSIT some time ago in 2011 wrote that, well, in the 80s, they were complaining about not having competitive local banks on this fate. Then you moved on to the 90s, numbers were coming in, we were excited. All of the banks that were collapsed were local banks, none an exception. Does it tell a story about how we were absolutely wrong about how prepared local banking systems were for this country?
I don't know. I must confess, I don't know. I don't have the numbers. I don't have the research work. But assuming what you're saying is true, a lot more local banks got onto the field. And when it came to an issue of some of them going off, a lot more of the local banks got off. The foreign banks, they came from somewhere, and they've had their own experience outside there. And for them to move in here, presuppose that whatever they were doing in their various countries were going well, and that's why they were able to open branches here. And since then, they've been around, and they are more concerned about corporate governance issues in their country, and therefore could easily fit into ours. Whereas the new ones here have to, learn to know that it's not just a question of having money and setting up a bank. You can have money and setting up a bank, but have you got the wherewithal in terms of the requisite background knowledge to run a bank or set up a bank?
So the current situation, is that a damning verdict on the quest for more local control of our economy, local banks, which will be predominantly Ghanaian, which reflects the Ghanaian ingenuity and entrepreneurship?
When you have more local banks, does it necessarily mean that there's Ghanaian ingenuity?
That is what
because in Nigeria, remember, I've gotten the figure, there were thousands of them, and quite about a quarter were dropped, were cancelled. These things go on in all countries. It's not new. It's not peculiar to Ghana. It goes on all over. In the U.S., remember what they went through?
Yeah.
Yes, so these things happen. It just happened that the lesser endowed in terms of knowledge about governance were local banks as against the foreign controlled banks.
How do we do with panic withdrawals? It's become the recent problem now. GN Bank and the other banks are really complaining. In fact, some of the banks are really saying that we are not in any distress. Please don't come and take your money from us. How do we deal with that situation?
It's a question of how the public perceives you. You see, we cannot assume that the rhetoric from the central bank or from the press or the media is what is pushing people to take their money back. But when the people, the so-called people or customers, hear of so many derogatory remarks being made, they hear of so many actions or decisions being taken in certain institutions, and hear of so many calamities and I wouldn't want to use any worse word, so I have to be mindful. They hear of so many things happening, various instances. Then immediately they're going to come on and say that, well, what about my money? My money is with so-and-so bank. They whisper around, they talk about, and say, which bank is that? Are they amongst those people? I don't know. Then you play yourself, okay, Charlie, let me take my money from there and give it to whoever, whichever bank that I think or heard that they are okay. So there'll be that withdrawal, and you put it there.
It's well, like what's in the rumor mill, but is there basis to, for example, panic withdrawals, and can the central bank stem that?
Central bank could come out and stem that if they are in a position to make an announcement regarding the minimum capital base that they require.
Yeah.
And the deadline is 31st December. And I think they made a point that by a certain date, I think by end of this October, they should see signs of it.
Yeah.
So we should wait. You see, central bank normally will not come out to make an announcement and then go back and tell you that they made a mistake. That's why they have to always hold their fire.
Do they have to review the minimum capital requirements? That's a big problem.
They may have
for local banks.
Yes, not for local, but for every bank.
Yeah.
If you are not ready to play ball, don't go into that game. It's as simple as that. So whether local or foreign, if you know within yourself that you're not a fit and proper person, as certain institutions use, then why go there? We should desist from the fact that, well, whatever you've been doing will come by a large pool of money, so you think, okay, I'm going to set up a bank. Do you have what it takes to set up a bank?
But more banks will collapse if it happens.
So be it. If that should happen, so be it. Who will live to fight another day?
That's more bitter pills for this economy.
Certainly. That will have to be.
My last question to you is about Ponzi schemes. Recently, there's been a lot of them in this country. Government have had to step in. One is currently raging. How do we deal with this problem?
We go per the route of the law. We use the law. The law will help you solve the problem. If it's a Ponzi, and then how that Ponzi was set up, do they have the requisite law behind them? Do they have the entitlement to do whatever they're doing, whichever form they want to do it? If they don't have it, they have no business being there. The issue then is, if they're already there and causing all kinds of havoc on the system, how do we stop that? And you cannot stop that without referring to the law.
Men's Gold comes to mind. Customers are complaining. We can't retrieve our money. SEC says we are reviewing the system. At what point will we have to wait for action when indeed there seems to be a lot of problem in there? Yes,
the SEC or whichever central bank or you mean Security and Exchange Commission, whichever institution guides them or Minerals Commission or whatever, they must apply the law. What the law says is what we must do. The unfortunate thing that you and I who have in our mind always is that we assume that because the law says that the next day you find out so the law should apply. That's not how it works. You have to go through certain processes. The law is the law, but there are processes to achieving the result.
Whilst people will lose money by the day.
Yes, I'm afraid
they have to step in.
Yes,
and government will have to come and pay depositors again.
That's why there's this general rule, caveat emptor, buyer beware.
Thank you so much, Ambassador. We're happy you opened your doors to us. We hope to do this more.
Thank you.
Well, folks, that's where we tie the nice ribbons on today's edition of Upfront. My name is Raymond Aqua.